In the headlines, the Court of Appeal will hear the latest elections case on Saturday. The United States and Canada warn against David Granger usurping power and says Guyana runs the risk of becoming an international outcast. The European Union is urging GECOM to rapidly declare the results of the elections using the recount figures. Families who were displaced in the deadly fire at Cummings Lodge recently seeks land to rebuild. And in sport, assistant coach Roddy Eswick says West Indies must treat the third test against England as a final. With the news, I'm Kurt Campbell. We're glad you could join us. First up, the Court of Appeal will Saturday hear the appeal in which APNU-AFC agent Masinga Jones wants the court to throw out Monday's decision of Chief Justice Roxanne George, who ruled that only the votes from the national recount currently stand and that the Chief Elections Officer must do as he's told by the Guyana Elections Commission, GECOM. The Chief Elections Officer, Keith Lewinfield, who is a respondent in the case, has decided not to make either written or oral submissions. His attorney, Senior Counsel Neil Boston, told the court. The judges who will hear and determine the case are High Court Judge Priya Sinarayan Bahari, along with Court of Appeal Judges Richie Prasad and Don Gregory Barnes, who serves as the court's president. Jones, in the application filed by her attorney Mayor Robertson, is complaining against the entirety of the Chief Justice's judgment on several grounds, including that the Chief Justice erred in law when she ruled that the issues raised were res judicata, or were matters heard and determined before. The Chief Justice, in her definitive ruling, said that GECOM must declare the results of the elections of March 2, 2020 only from the data garnered from the national vote recount, and that any irregularities would have to be addressed in an elections petition. She also ruled that the Chief Elections Officer is subject to the direction and the control of the Commission in submitting his report to GECOM. Guyana's national vote recount of the still undeclared March 2, 2020 election, which has received the support of the international community and sanctioned as valid by several local and regional courts, continued to be rejected by the unrelenting incumbent APNU-AFC. The David Granger-led coalition on Wednesday continued to discard the recount figures, which showed the main opposition, People's Progressive Party, winning by over 15,000 votes. With the declaration of the election delayed by almost 5 months due to a series of court proceedings, lending to an unstable political environment in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, the coalition threw its support behind a fresh appeal filed by one of its agents, Masinga Jones.
The coalition has taken note of the ruling of Chief Justice Roxanne George on the 20th of July 2020 in the case of Masinga Jones versus the Guyana Elections Commission and others. The APNU-AFC coalition, as always, remains committed to the judicial process. That process is incomplete as it stands, and the matter has been appealed in the Guyana Court of Appeal. In the notice of appeal, which cites 18 grounds, the appellant, Masinga Jones, seeks to set aside or reverse the entire judgment of Chief Justice Roxanne George. Case management in this matter is set for 1,500 hours today. Such an appeal, my dear brothers and sisters, is lawful, proper and guaranteed under the Constitution of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, our supreme law.
The coalition has rejected calls along with several previous court judgments by Guyana's High Court and the Caribbean Court of Justice, CCJ, which validated the recount data. It said it remains confident of a credible and legitimate outcome to the elections and is willing to have dialogue with other political parties and stakeholders on the way forward.
The APNU-AFC coalition, in the national interest and with a view to maintaining stability and peace, remains open to dialogue with other political parties and stakeholders on the way forward for our country. The APNU-AFC coalition is prepared to act responsibly to bring a resolution to the ongoing political situation. We remain confident of a credible and legitimate outcome to these elections.
The coalition refused to accept defeat and continues to hold on to executive power, Although the international community, including the Organization of American States, the Commonwealth, the Caribbean Community, along with the United States, Britain, Canada, and the European Union have all called for the recount figures to form the basis of any declaration that will be made. Guyana stands to face serious sanctions by its international partners should any government be installed without using the recount figures, which promises a presidency for Irfan Ali of the People's Progressive Party. The spokesperson for the European Union's Foreign Affairs Chief today urged that the Guyana Elections Commission rapidly issues a declaration based on the credible results of the recount certified by the Caribbean Community, ensuring respect for the will of the people of Guyana in line with the ruling of the Caribbean Court of Justice. 4.5 months after the general and regional elections, President David Granger has refused to concede defeat, although his coalition lost the elections by over 24,000 votes. In a statement, the spokesperson for Joseph Borrell, the High Representative for the Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, said the recent clear ruling by the Caribbean Court of Justice now provides a solid foundation for a peaceful and democratic solution to Guyana's post-electoral crisis. The EU said it expects all Guyanese leaders and stakeholders to support such a declaration to conclude this long overdue democratic process. According to the EU, only then can a legitimate government be sworn in, which is urgent and essential for the country. Still ahead on the newsroom, the United States and Canada warn against David Granger usurping power and says Guyana runs the risk of becoming an international outcast. President David Granger, who was toppled in a no-confidence motion, took over a year to allow elections and now refuses to concede defeat, risk making Guyana an international pariah or outcast, the United States warned on Tuesday. The United States, through its Deputy Permanent Representative, Bradley Freden, addressed the special meeting of the Permanent Council of the Organization of American States, OAS. His comments were later shared on Twitter by Michael Kozak, the United States Acting Assistant Secretary for Western Hemisphere Affairs, who was repeatedly warned of the consequences if the results of the recount are not accepted. Freden acknowledged that both the OAS and the Caribbean Community CARICOM have determined that based on the national vote recount, the opposition People's Progressive Party won the elections. But Granger and his APNU-AFC refused to accept the results, launching several legal battles to stay in power, hoping for some form of technicality to get sworn into office. But the international community, including the United States, which has already imposed visa restrictions, are not prepared to tolerate the defiance of the results.
As recently as July 11th, the OAS had noted the CEO's defiance of the GECOM chairperson by submitting a final report which includes data compiled prior to the national recount. The OAS has clearly stated that there could be no justification for this action, and that the CEO acted in bad faith and contrary to the interests of democracy in Guyana. Mr. Chairman, we fully agree with the OAS conclusion that the only democratic solution for Guyana at this time is to respect the results of the national recount. This is fully in keeping with Guyana's commitments under the Democratic Charter. In democracy, leaders step aside when they're voted out of office. That speaks to the importance and strength of institutions, not individuals, and to the power of the people, not those who would usurp their power. Senior U.S. officials, including the Secretary of State, have made numerous public statements about Guyana since the March elections. We stand with the Guyanese people. Their government must heed their will. Elections must be free, fair, credible, and transparent. Mr. Chairman, Secretary Pompeo has stated time and again there would be consequences for individuals who seek to undermine democracy. That is why on July 15th, he announced visa restrictions on individuals who were responsible for undermining democracy in Guyana. And these could also include members of their families. Our actions came after months of warnings and expressions of concern. We do not take it lightly. This measure is intended to send a clear message of the consequences of subverting democracy and the rule of law. Mr. Chairman, I hope that it is not lost on Guyana's leaders how swift international support for our action has been. The CARICOM chair said the entire world knows a small group is trying to hijack Guyana's elections. Canada has demanded a swift and transparent conclusion to the election process and held accountable those who prevent it. Brazil has called on Guyana's leaders to respect the popular will. The United Kingdom has begun the process of imposing sanctions against culpable officials. This is not an accident. There's no way to minimize how flagrant the actions of Guyana's leaders have been. The United States has long said that we have no preference in favor of one party or the other, as long as it is selected through a free, fair, and credible electoral process. That is why the work of the OAS remains so important throughout our region. It is not too late for Guyana, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary General. We call upon its leadership to honor the results of democratic elections and ask all sides to work together to develop new mechanisms for inclusive politics and government. If stalemate continues, however, it will only be the Guyanese people who suffer. A Partnership for National Unity and its leaders face a stark choice. Does the party want to be a leader in the hemisphere? Does Guyana want to be a leader in the hemisphere and an example of democracy? Or does it want to be an international pariah? Does Guyana want to have a functioning executive and legislature so it can pass the laws it needs to encourage the development of its people? Or does it want to remain a country whose leaders cannot travel and are subject to sanctions? These are the choices facing Guyana today. Our meeting today reflects the severity of Guyana's predicament, and we hope that Guyana makes the right choice.
Canada's ambassador and permanent representative to the Organization of American States, OAS, UATSET, on Wednesday said Canada will work with its partners and use all tools available to demand a swift end to the elections in Guyana. A recount of all votes cast in the March 2nd elections showed that President David Granger's coalition, APNU-AFC, lost the elections by over 24,000 votes, but he refuses to concede defeat and step aside to allow the swearing-in of the PPP's Dr. Irfan Ali. The Canadian ambassador addressed the OAS Permanent Council on the electoral process, saying Canada strongly regrets the extended delay in declaring the results of the elections, which were held over 4.5 months now.
Of the democratic rights of the people of Guyana, and in light of the obligation of governments to promote and defend democracy, as set out in the Inter-American Democratic Charter, Canada firmly maintains that the rule of law and democratic processes must be respected and a declaration be announced without further delay. Canada supports calls by the OAS, CARICOM, the Commonwealth, and civil society organizations to announce the results based on the national recount, as validated by the OAS and CARICOM observer missions and upheld by the Caribbean Court of Justice, and again yesterday by Guyana's Chief Justice in dismissing the latest challenge to the recount results. Canada is committed to working with partners at the OAS and will consider using all tools at our disposal to demand a swift and transparent conclusion to the election process and to hold accountable those who prevent it.
Figures from the recount, which were live streamed, showed the PPP won the elections with 233,336 votes. APNU-AFC secured 217,920 votes. Together, the other parties secured 9,096 votes. It means, therefore, that APNU-AFC lost the elections by a combined total of 24,512 votes. The Caribbean Community, CARICOM, has again refuted claims by the de facto government of President David Granger that CARICOM and other international governments and organizations are interfering in Guyana's internal affairs. During a special meeting of the Permanent Council of the Organization of American States on Tuesday, St. Vincent's Ambassador Luan Galen Gilchrist, who spoke on behalf of other CARICOM states, said that all CARICOM is doing is fulfilling the requirements of the agreement that all member states, including Guyana, signed.
CARICOM has been monitoring with concern the political tensions in its neighbor and sister state in the OAS, the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. Both the former chair and the current chair of CARICOM have called for a declaration of the March 2nd elections results based on the national recount. So too have members of the international community, including governments of member states of this organization. It will be recalled that CARICOM was invited to play a role in the Guyana elections shortly after the disputes arose over the tabulation of the March 2nd ballot. The invitation was extended jointly by the President of Guyana and the Leader of the Opposition with the agreement of the Guyana Elections Commission. In playing a role in CARICOM's elections, CARICOM is doing no more than carrying out the requirements of the CARICOM Treaty, by which, in its preamble, every CARICOM government accepted all the various agreements, including the Charter of Civil Society, which the Conference of Heads of Government adopted on 19 February 1997. At Article 6 of the Charter, under the heading Political Rights, the Charter declares that, I quote, "The state shall ensure the existence of a fair and open democratic system through the holding of free elections at reasonable intervals by secret ballot, underpinned by an electoral system in which all can have confidence and which will ensure the free expression of the will of the people in the choice of their representatives." End of quote. CARICOM's role, therefore, is not interference in the domestic affairs of a foreign country. It is participation in community affairs, which is the essence of the revised CARICOM Treaty and the Charter of Civil Society that preceded it. We in CARICOM underscore that in our concerted efforts to assist Guyana, our willingness to help resides in our desire to reach peaceful solutions and not to widen the current divisions. We urge the relevant authorities in Guyana and all stakeholders to respect the rule of law and to make progress in finalizing the legal processes, including taking account of rulings by Guyana's apex court, the Caribbean Court of Justice. The decision was delivered on July 8th this year. This organization has accompanied this entire process in Guyana from the elections on May 2nd and throughout the national recount of the votes scrutinized by CARICOM. In doing so, the OAS has given space and time to all parties in Guyana to settle all of the issues related to the elections, a process that has gone on for 4.5 months. CARICOM recommends that the OAS Permanent Council remains seized of the situation in Guyana and that it review the situation as may be necessary. In the meantime, the CARICOM group at the OAS commends the people of Guyana for their patience and calm and assures them of our continuing familial support.
Families who were displaced in the deadly fire at Cummins Lodge recently seeks land to rebuild. That and more stories when the newsroom returns. We tell you now that the victims of the gruesome Cummins Lodge fire that killed a family of 3 about a month ago has been seeking lands from the Central Housing and Planning Authority to rebuild. 25 persons were left homeless after the fire. Isanella Patwa reports.
Desiree Miller lost her sister, nephew, and brother-in-law who were burnt alive after being trapped in their fully grilled apartment at Cummins Lodge, Greater Georgetown on June 27th. 40-year-old Beverly Miller, her 46-year-old husband Marvin Lewis, a businessman of Port Kaituman Region 1, and their 14-year-old son, Dowal Ifil, were found huddled together after the fire. Desiree told the newsroom during a telephone interview on Wednesday that the family is still in shock over the incident. The woman said she is now trying to get her life back to some level of normalcy.
I went out and had to go back, but then they see nobody now. Yeah, make a point of the minister and all of that. Because I applied for a piece of land, me and no call yet.
When did you apply?
2030.
Beverly Miller is survived by her other son, 17-year-old Alani Ifil. The newsroom understands that the family is also looking into the teen acquiring lands that Beverly applied for years ago. Meanwhile, Police Commander Senior Superintendent Philip Azor told the newsroom that there has been no progress with the investigation. The building had 8 apartments and a total of 28 persons lived there. The landlord, who is stranded in the United States due to COVID-19, had left his son and daughter in charge of the apartment. The fire is believed to have been deliberately set by the son who had just left the building before it engulfed in flames. He was reportedly collecting rent from tenants. He was arrested by police but was released after 72 hours. There has also been a long-standing dispute between the owners of the building.
Well, so that's why I keep saying nobody ain't really telling we were really going on. Yesterday, the man for the son talked to me and saying, he's sorry for what happened. So I said, sorry, can't bring back 3 lives. First, me nephew without a mother. Whatever little people give me, they go, we take in.
Marvin Lewis's sister, Coretta Wolford, who lived in the building with her 5 children, her niece and her husband, also spoke with the newsroom via telephone Wednesday. She explained that she got through with her land in February this year, but lost all the documents in the fire. According to Wolford, the Central Housing and Planning Authority has not been helpful in assisting her with retrieving the documents.
All my documents burned up in the fire. So I have no documents. I went out housing this morning to see the minister. And they say you can't see the minister. The minister come to go to some meeting. And they send me to some PO. The secretary said I can't see him just like that. And all these push around. So I don't know.
Since the COVID-19 health crisis, Wolford said she has been unable to work. It has also been an emotional journey for the victims, and as such, they are staying in touch and supporting each other.
Well, since the fire, I would say we're trying to cope because I'm not working. So, nobody tell us anything. The police never call us to tell us anything about what the fire report stated or anything. So the little that people would offer, I'll be grateful for the little that they offer. Well, they all live like a family there. So we would say we as the family still, because that's how we live from the time we live in there. That's how we live. We eat in one. From time to time, we would share whatever we have with one another, just like a family, you know.
The family continues to call for justice for the 3 lives lost in the fire.
The Guyana Police Force has issued a wanted bulletin for 24-year-old Keon Tallman Smith in connection with the murder of gold miner Theo Max James. James, 37, of West La Penitence Housing Scheme, Georgetown, was stabbed multiple times about the body on July 13. The incident occurred at about 1940 hours in a mining camp at Blackwater Crusher, Cuyuni River. Police headquarters had reported that the victim and suspect were involved in a triangular love affair with a female. James had returned to the mining area 3 days prior to his death. He was stabbed while playing a bingo game after the woman told Smith to move out because James had returned. A post-mortem revealed that James died as a result of punctured lung and multiple stab wounds. Smith went into hiding since the incident. Anyone with information that may lead to the arrest of Keon Smith is asked to contact the nearest police station. His last known address is Linden. A pedal cyclist was killed Tuesday after he reportedly swerved into the path of motorcar PMM 8751 on the Melanie East Coast Demerara Public Road at about 18 hours 50. Police headquarters said the cyclist, who is so far unidentified, was wearing a dark blue shirt, blue long pants and a pair of long boots at the time of the accident. According to the police, the car was being driven by a 22-year-old Haslington resident east along the northern side of the road, and the cyclist was in the front of the car on the other side of the road. The driver told police that the cyclist rode into the path of the car. As a result of the collision, the cyclist received injuries to the head and body. He was picked up in an unconscious state by the driver and taken to Georgetown Public Hospital, where he was pronounced dead on arrival. The body is presently at the hospital mortuary awaiting identification and a post-mortem examination. The driver, who tested negative for alcohol, is in police custody. When the newsroom returns, the financial, weather and bridge reports along with sport.